Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, money questions you need to ask.
It's to be your best with the professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
Veronica Karas is a certified financial planner and the author of the new book, Money Matters, Everything You Should Have Learned in School But Didn't.
Welcome to the Big Success Show, Veronica.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
So this new book, Money Matters, and I just love the second part, everything you should have learned in school. Now, there's a lot of things I probably should have learned in school, but I think you're telling me some stuff that they didn't teach us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big passion project of mine. I think so much of what people struggle with in their day-to-day are things we didn't learn in school. So finance is the cause near and dear to my heart. But if you think about, all the main reasons people run into problems, we're never taught even how to pick the right person to marry or the right partner to spend our life with, or how to deal with our emotions, or all of these different things that, you kind of need to go through your life on a day-to-day basis. We just don't know.
That's a great point. I've always thought of it with the finance side, but I've never thought of it with all the other stuff. You're absolutely right. That's pretty fascinating.
It's kind of crazy.
And so now, as a financial planner, what's the most common question that you get asked?
Well, the most common question I like to get asked is, how do I start getting my finances in order? Mm-hmm. Although I do have to admit that a lot of people just ask me, what stock should I buy? Which doesn't quite go over as well as the first one.
How do we get started then?
Sure. So the best way to get started, and I say this to everyone, regardless of where you are in your financial journey or how old you are, or what you have, is to figure out what you spend. And I think so many people just don't know where their money goes. We live in a completely credit-driven society, and it's so easy to just swipe. And when you swipe for everything, you're like, oh, there's $4 here, and there's $20 here, and I'll just buy this thing online that Facebook recommended. And whatever it is, you're just like swipe or PayPal or Venmo. I mean, they're making it easier and easier to pay for things, so you don't even have to be mindful about where your money is going on a regular basis. I mean, now you just have to turn your phone around and you could swipe your phone. It doesn't even require an actual card. So the number one place is always, where does your money actually go? Because that'll tell you what your priorities currently are. So, and I mentioned this in the book, once you write out where your money is going, you'll find out whether your priorities are saving for a house or retirement, or if your priority is supporting Seamless or Starbucks, as an example. So it becomes really clear. And a lot of times people will tell me things like, all I want to do is make sure that, I can buy a house in 2 years. And I'm like, well, let's see if your cash flow actually aligns with what you're saying. Because if all you want to do is buy a house in 2 years, and that's what's really important to you, then you should be saving a lot of money. And if you're not, then your priorities aren't actually to buy a house in 2 years, right? And it goes like that throughout someone's financial life. So someone who tells me, all I want to do is put my kid through college, but then they have, 4 or 5 golf club memberships, you're telling me that your priority is not to put your kid through college, it's to play golf. And that's fine, but you have to be honest with yourself before you can make the changes that are necessary.
And I think a lot of people never stop to think about that. It's kind of like one of our friends once said, I don't have time is not a statement of fact, it's a statement of priorities. And the same thing is true of money, that exactly what you're saying, that it's a statement of our priorities. How we spend reflects our priorities.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And the more honest you can be with yourself, the more productive your future changes are going to be. My favorite is when people give me cash flow sheets and they tell me they have, something ridiculous like 80% of the money that they bring in is just left over at the end of the month. They have no idea where it goes. I'm like, well, if you're not saving 80% of what you bring in, you're spending it on something. And there'll be times where I'll go back with my clients or anyone that I'm helping, 4, 5, 6 times to really get down what they're spending. Because if you don't know what you're spending, you can't figure out where you're going to cut back. The reality is if any of you want to meet any financial goal that you have, it probably requires saving something, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And one of the things, you mentioned this in your book, and I loved the explanation of this. So prioritizing buying a home. And one of the things you said, and I've never thought about it this clear cut, about how so many times we take the mortgage payment and the rent payment and we equate those two as if those were the only costs. With renting, it's close, but with owning a home, there's a whole lot of other things that go with it. So what's wrong with just comparing your rent to your mortgage payment?
Yeah, so being a new homeowner myself, I've kind of experienced this, but you have to budget in everything else. With the home, you have property taxes. With rent, you don't. With a home, you have all of these maintenance expenses. With rent, you probably have someone you can call, like a landlord or a super or something like that, who's going to come, a superintendent who's going to come and fix whatever it is that needs fixing. In a home, you're responsible for all of it. Mm-hmm. With rent, you have like something's usually included. It's like water and gas you usually don't have to pay for when you're renting an apartment or a house. With a home, you pay for everything. I mean, water is currently cheap, which is a problem, which is a different sort of problem. Mm-hmm. But gas bills run pretty high, especially if you're like in the Northeast or Illinois or somewhere cold in the winter. It can get very expensive, and if you don't plan for that and it throws you off guard, it can throw off your whole financial plan. And the reality is that banks, when they issue your mortgage, don't really still take into account all of the potential home expenses. Of course, they'll factor in like homeowners and your property taxes, but they won't factor in whether you can afford to repair something that breaks in your house, but you certainly want to factor that in.
Exactly, yes, because, I mean, you've got to be capitalized enough to be able to handle those kind of shocks to the system.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually really funny that we talk about this now because Saturday my dishwasher caught fire.
Oh, wow.
All the things that could happen in a house. I bought my house about 8 months ago, and it literally started smoking. The control panel just burned up, and apparently there was a class action against the company and this whole big thing years ago. I bought the house with the dishwasher. Nobody would have thought. It's not like something I could have prevented or controlled. Nothing I would have ever looked up. Anyway, now I have to go and buy a new dishwasher, and I have to know, I always have to be prepared for the next thing. We had our washer and dryer break soon after we bought the house. Like all of these things, when you buy a home, you never know, even if it's a new construction, what you're getting yourself into until you're there and something breaks. You don't know how much it's going to cost. And God forbid it's like a roof leak and you have to, repair your roof, all of these things. It adds up so quickly. And if you're not prepared, it can really cause big damage.
Well, whether you're a homeowner or not, saving is incredibly important. And when it comes to savings, you say in your book that there is one key habit that can help people save more. What is that, Veronica?
It's paying yourself first. And I always say this because it's as much a good financial habit as it is a mental and emotional habit as well. I think if you figure out your budget, you figure out how much you can save, and you put the savings away first before you do the rest of the spending, you're really sending a message that to yourself, first and foremost, you're putting your goals ahead of whatever the immediate needs are, and needs and pleasures and wants and whatever else. And honestly, I found that everyone finds a way to make it work. So if you commit to saving, 15, 20% of what you earn, and you put that away before you do your spending, you'll never run short. Because if you only give yourself the leftovers, that's also the message that you're sending to yourself. But your future goals are your leftovers.
But Veronica, I hate leftovers.
Most people do.
We're talking with Veronica Karas about her new book called Money Matters, Everything You Should Have Learned in School but Didn't. One of the things that you mentioned several times in your book is that it's incredibly important to be able to ask better questions. So I've got to ask. Why?
So I think the questions you ask is kind of exactly what you get. Beyond, just finance and everything else, which I'll talk about in a second, it's the questions you ask of yourself, right? So if your questions to yourself are constantly something along the lines of, how can I make this better? You're going to get outcomes throughout your day and throughout your life that reflect the questions that you ask. If the question you're asking is, what's wrong with this? believe me, you can find what's wrong with this in absolutely anything if that you're looking for. And it's the same thing in finance, right? So if the questions you ask are like really excellent questions, which I love when clients come to me with questions that are like, how can I make sure that I can maintain my lifestyle or maybe even increase it when I retire and not ever have to worry about the principle of my money being there? That's a very different question that leads to a very different answer and different type of financial advice than a question like, what's the stock that'll make me the most money?
Yes.
And they'll lead to different outcomes because the questions you ask get you what you're looking for, right? So like the example I always use is if you walk into a bank and you don't know what questions you're going to ask, you don't even know what fees you're going to get. You don't know who's going to come to you and be like, oh my gosh, I just want to open this type of account. Okay, that's fine. The banker could easily do that. But what if you ask, what's the most cost-efficient way that'll benefit my financial situation? What type of account would that be? Maybe that's a very different answer. Maybe that'll get you to a very different result, especially further down the line. So I think that the questions that people ask get them exactly kind of what they ask for. And the better your questions, the better your results.
So let's just say, I mean, I think you would agree that a lot of people are intimidated by finance. So what if you feel like, boy, I just really haven't been focusing on finance, my financial future. How do you know what questions to ask? How would you know to go into the bank prepared that way? If you're just kind of trying to get your financial act together, how do you discover what questions you should be asking?
Yeah, I think actually the best way to approach that is to ask that question, right? So in what you just said, there's a major question. I would, if I knew nothing, I would walk into a bank and say, my name is Veronica Karas. I'm 28 years old. I make X amount of money. I spend this amount. I need to know what account or what is it that I need to know? What questions should I be asking? You're a professional. What do I need to know? What am I missing? What should I be doing? Tell me. And most people, if assuming they're educated and they know what they're doing, will be more than happy to educate you. You just have to be willing to receive whatever they say and then see if it makes sense.
That is absolutely excellent advice. That's going to be so helpful to somebody who's listening right now because you just gave them a blueprint of what to go and do. And it's really not as intimidating or as big and scary as it sounds.
Yeah, I find that most people that I've encountered, and that, believe me, there's so many things that, of course, I don't know about. If I just walk up to someone who I consider a professional in the field or, they work for a law firm or something like that, and what I need is legal advice, I just go, what are the questions I'm not asking? What should I know? What should I know before I make a decision?
Often the
and
best,
they'll tell you.
Yeah, it's often the best question to ask. What don't I know? What do you know that I don't know, right? So this is kind of related. Near the end of the book, you do a great job of talking about how the language we use can sabotage the future we really want. And I think that's kind of a direct quote from you, actually, the sabotage the future we really want. How do we get past these kind of limiting beliefs?
I mean, the easy answer is to create new beliefs. Of course, that's much harder than in practice than just saying it, right?
Absolutely.
So I think the easiest thing is to just write a list. Figure out so many people don't figure out, I think, what they actually want. A lot of people, I ask this question when they come in to talk about their finances. What do you want to do with your money? And people are like, I don't know. My mom told me I should save something. I have no idea. Like, where's this going to go, right? You should probably have an idea in general, not only where you want your money to go eventually, right? Because you're not just saving for nothing. No one's saving for nothing.
Right.
There's something in your head. You're just not, you can't articulate it, or maybe you can't put it down on paper. But the same thing goes with everything else, right? And if you take a moment and you write down, let's say, just using someone typical, I want to, travel a lot, or I want to have a lot of adventures, or I want to not have to worry about money. I want to know that I can wake up any day, buy anything that I want, and not worry whether I have the money there. That's a financial goal, right? But is what you're saying to yourself currently going to get you to that goal, right? So if you're like, if you go about your day, going back to what I said earlier, if you go about your day and you're like, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? For like everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking for the thing that's missing and what's wrong. Is that going to give you a life where you don't have to worry about money? Probably not, right? So
Right.
it all ties, the questions that we ask all tie in together with how we view ourselves and the world and our life path. And I think just taking the time to write out what you want from your life. What is, like, if all of your dreams came true, what does the ultimate life look like for you? Again, something we're not taught in schools. And then figure out what are the things I need to believe to be that person that I just wrote out on paper? And do I believe them now? Because if I don't, I need to switch. Something has to change, right? And I think once you have a vision, once you have the vision of where it's going and how it can look and your ideal dream, once you have that vision, the belief, you start to language things differently. Because just saying, like, I never want to worry about money is very different than I want the stock that makes the most bank for my buck, right? Those are two different people and two different approaches. One is very forward looking and one is very, like, short term.
Yeah.
So
one's looking to get rich quick, right?
Yeah. How can I get rich the fastest? We'll get you a
Exactly.
very different answer than how can I live my dream life and not have to worry about money?
Yeah, exactly right. So, and how do you get rich the fastest is to convince other people to buy something of yours that promises them to get rich, and then they're not going to get rich, but you will.
Yeah, probably true. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, in terms of asking great questions, having that mindset, a person who really knows what they want, I believe, this is a personal thing, but I believe that a person who really knows what they want out of their life will never ask that question.
Actually, I got one more quick thing, because when somebody asks what stock should I buy, I always think the best answer is, I'll tell you tomorrow. What stock should I buy today? I'll tell you tomorrow.
Well, my answer is always like, for what? What stock should I buy for what?
Yeah.
What's your goal? What do you want that stock to do for you? If you want it to go through the roof, I don't know, because I don't know what the next technology is. I don't know. You know, Apple is doing really great right now, but I always, when someone comes to me and says, like, this stock or like Amazon is the next big company, they're doing great. That's true. But there was a point where Netscape and AOL did really well, and they're nowhere to be found.
Exactly.
So unless you have a crystal ball on what the next big thing is, even if you think you know, I would say bet less than 10% of everything you own on that.
Yes.
So that if it doesn't work out, you're still okay.
I think a lot of times we ask questions that I always equate it to a business I had. A business I used to have, everybody would, when the customers called, they'd always say, how much would you charge for? And it's not because that was the only question on their mind or even the most important question on their mind. It's the only question they knew to ask. And I think a lot of times when people are asking, what stock should I buy? They don't know what other questions to ask, which leads to what you said in your book, which is just learning to ask better questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to ask for questions. There's so many times where I walk in and I'm buying a product. I was buying a dishwasher. I'm like, what do I need to know about this? I've never bought a dishwasher before. Tell me what questions I should ask. And I blew the guy at PC Richard & Son away because he was like, nobody's ever asked me that. People always ask, what's the cheapest way that I could buy dishes and the thing doesn't make a lot of noise? I'm like, but that's not, I want a product that's going to last me a long time. So tell me what I should know. And he knows. He sells dishwashers all day. I'm not going to step on his toes. He'll tell me what I need to know.
Well, Veronica, your book is fantastic. And I think a lot of people just think finance is just about numbers. But you show in your book that when you really visualize where it is you want to go and set your priorities, you can bring that along with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I completely agree. I tell people all the time, you can probably, if you do the right thing and you make the right financial decisions and you ask really good questions, you could probably save more than most stock pickers will ever make. Because just, if you have the right tax efficient strategies and you have the right type of life insurance where it's not costing you like over the top, and you have the right estate plan so that your kids don't have to spend a lot of money, going to court and probating it and all these things, you could save so much more money than stocks or any investment could possibly ever make you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the most efficient way to do it, right? Because if you never make those mistakes in the first place, you'll never have spent that money, which is why I think this book and why I wrote it, it's a huge passion of mine. The younger you read it, and it's really written like age 16 and up, because I think before that, you're not really dealing with a lot of money in general or having to make financial decisions. But I think if I could prevent even one person from taking out the wrong type of loan or getting into credit card debt, I mean, that just saves you so much money. I mean, I know so many people, thousands and thousands of dollars wasted on credit card interest. Why? Because nobody ever taught them how it really works.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can make those better decisions from the get-go, you could save more than most people will make.
And real quick, I'll just say, while the younger you learn this, the better. Now that you know it, start now.
Yes,
Do it now.
absolutely. There's nothing can make up for time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do talk about compound interest in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing beats starting as early as possible, for sure.
Yep.
The book is called Money Matters, Everything You Should Have Learned in School But Didn't. You can find it online at themoneymattersbook.com. Veronica Karas, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Until next time,
Here's to your big success.
Tips to be your best with a professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.